There he is.
Hey,
Steve, how are you?
yeah, I'm good, man. It's been a pretty nice day so far. How about you?
Very good. Yeah, it's nice and sunny here in Toronto. You're in Montreal, you said, right?
I am in Montreal, yeah, and it's actually a really nice day here as well. So
I detect a British accent there. I want to tell you that my parents were born and raised in Muswell Hill. I spent some time over in the UK with lots of friends and family. How long have you been in Montreal, and where are you originally from?
been in Montreal since 2014. Originally, I'm from the northwest of England, so
Okay.
the place called Chester. It's near Liverpool,
Yeah.
so up there. But yeah, been here in Montreal, trying to get used to these winters.
Well, good luck with that, man. That's a can be a rough January, February. Well, December, January, February, right? I toured a lot in Quebec, so believe me, I feel for you, my friend. And always nice to meet a fellow teabag. I know I was born here, but I feel like a an Englishman for the
Yeah.
most of the time.
Is that what you're drinking now? Are you drinking tea?
I am. I am. And there's a few places in town that are called, British shops, right? And you can get like the chocolate bars and some of the old my parents, they used to use this stuff for stuffing for Christmas and Thanksgiving called OXO, and you mix it up and yeah. So we'll go to the Brit store, but no, I love tea in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, and I guess you played over there a few times with Coney Hatch.
It's really interesting. Like during the heyday of Coney Hatch, which is essentially 82 to 85, I would say we had about three or four different tours lined up and never played there, Steve. It was crazy. So we were supposed to play with Whitesnake. That was canceled. We were supposed to play with Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. That one was canceled. I think at one time there was some Cheap Trick shows that they were going over there, and so the entire time Coney was getting lots of love from Kerrang and Sounds and all those magazines over there. We never ever played there. And then fast forward to all these years later when we put out Coney Hatch 4, and that was out on a label called Frontier. And all of a sudden, we ended up, be careful what you wish for. Like we released it because it was fun, and somebody was paying attention to us all those years later. But that record, Coney Hatch 4, got voted in the top 50 records of the year by Classic Album Magazine. And then all of a sudden we got an invitation to play Firefest in Nottingham. So that was our first show ever.
Wow.
And we've done subsequent gigs in France and Belgium and in Germany. So there's this resurgence of what I call Coneheads, old Coney Hatch fans that love the band. And we finally got over to Europe, which was nice because we had all that love early back then, and seeing all these men come, they were like maybe 50, 60-year-old guys going, we've waited for 30 years for you to play in the UK, and they've got albums and everything. And
Yeah.
that was pretty special to play there. And I've got a real, like, obviously with my parents being born and raised there and having friends and family, and the name Coney Hatch, they originated from the UK. It was nice to play a couple gigs there, finally.
And it's kind of nice that that came out of an unexpected, like you said, you were just making music more for fun at that point, and suddenly, you get in that unexpected exposure,
Yeah.
and that kind of brings us nicely to 2022, because now you're making music that started out as probably something that you didn't expect to get quite as much attention as it's getting, right?
Well, yes and no. Let me tell you, the minute Alex Lifeson is part of your project, and people are going to pay attention, right? But you're absolutely right in terms of when we started writing together. There were no discussions about let's put a band together, or let's go out and tour, or let's go shop a record deal, or it actually started. And I know it's a very overused phrase, but it started very organically with four people that hit it off, like-minded. We were having a blast writing songs, and just, we were in the middle of COVID. So just to even be able to be creative and share files back and forth was a very nice positive distraction in the craziness that we've all been through for COVID. But it was kind of strange how it evolved. And then, like you said, you know, here you go. A lot of stuff was unexpected. And now here we are 4 years later, and we've got a record out. And it's nice to see some, I guess, like finality to it in terms of we worked this hard to put it together, and we found a home and a label that was excited about it and put it out there for the world to hear, because Alex Lifeson was the most vocal about this project. The more songs we did, the more he kept saying, Andy, this stuff is awesome, man. We got to get it out. We got to release it. He was so proud of it. And it came with him just kind of lending some guitar tracks on Shadow. And then, as I said, Steve, the more songs we did, the more he was like, what are we doing with this? We got to do this. Let's get it out there. Let's, you know, you must know some people, call some people. Let's get this record out there. So it came like the most passive guy in the project became the most vocal guy in the project.
Yeah, nice. So obviously, you know, you and Alex, a lot of people would consider you rock and roll royalty, especially in Canada. Now, people that know Coney Hatch, they're going to have an idea of what that music means. And then people who know Rush are going to have an idea of what that music means. And they might think that when these two things combine, that they have an idea of what to expect. What would you say to those people?
Your expectations are 100% wrong. Because, and you're right. And I think that's been the interesting feedback, like people going, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this, right? Because with all due respect to my bandmates in Coney Hatch, that's a very, even I'll use the word narrow. It's a narrow lane. We're a hard rock band that is 4 on the floor, cock rock, 2 guitars, bass, drums. Alex's world with Rush, the fans know what to expect. You're into an amazing prog ride with incredible musicianship, right? Envy of None, any of the ideas that Alex and I brought to the table, no way they could exist in Rush or Coney Hatch land. And nor did we want them to. And part of the enjoyable ride that we've had was being able to stretch out of our old comfort zone and being able to draw in influences of music that I love and that he loves, and Alf and Maiah. You know, I'll make no qualms about it. I was a big new wave guy, despite the fact I was in a hair metal band. I loved bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash and Japan and Depeche Mode and The Cure, and the list goes on and on. 999, Blondie, the Ramones. Like, I loved all of that alternative rock. And so I always listened to it, Steve. And some of the songs it came out in like Never Said I Love You or Dumb, you can hear those what I'll call Euro alternative new wave stylings. But Alex and I both love electronic music. We both love ambient music. I'm a big fan of Massive Attack and Thievery Corporation and Bonobo. And so when I'm not scratching the Coney Hatch itch, I was writing, and I have a little folder on my desktop called the Anti-Drew, and my friends call me Drew, and it was anything that you wouldn't expect me to do, right? And as a musician, that was a fun ride for me to write that way. I play differently, played a lot of keyboard Moog bass on this, which would have never lived in Coney Hatch land. And if Alex was on the line with us, he would tell you that he crafted those guitar parts specifically going, what wouldn't I do in Rush land? I'm not like, yes, I will tell you as a Rush fan, because I am. I saw the band play All the World's, play Massey Hall, All the World's a Stage when they recorded that album. As a kid in Toronto, I grew up, I was weaned off of Rush, so I know everything about the band, and then went on to work with them. So I, you know, when I listen to Envy of None as a fan, I go, oh yeah, there's Alex. I can hear him. There's his guitar parts. They aren't as obvious as what you're not going to hear Limelight or Tom Sawyer or anything like that in there, but you can hear the way he's crafted his guitar lines around, and there's a lot of swelling and soundscaping, and fans of Rush might not be aware of some of those layers in Rush's music that were actually Alex crafting them on the guitar, right? But they sound like keyboards, right? So the two of us I mean, that's a very long answer, Steve, but the two of us really enjoyed not fitting into that Rush Coney Hatch box and stepping outside it and trying some stuff. It was very rewarding and liberating as musicians to do that.
So I'm lucky enough, I've heard the album, and I have to say, I love it. Like a lot of the bands that you mentioned, I'm a big fan of anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm also a fan of your bands. So there's definitely, there's definitely an audience out there that are open-minded enough to love this stuff. And I think it was on the track Spy House that I was like, there's Alex. I can hear him
right
there, but he's doing something that you wouldn't expect, like you say, but it fits the music perfectly. And you mentioned there's a lot of electronic sides to this, and I can hear Depeche Mode in there. I can hear Massive Attack, who you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
And obviously with Maiah's vocals, that brings a completely different element to it. So tell me about how you met up with Maiah, and where does she fit initially into this?
Yeah, and first off, thank you for saying that you love the record. We're very proud of it. And I forgot a couple biggies for me. I love Nine Inch Nails. I love Rammstein, or Rammstein, however you want to pronounce it. But I listen. I'm a music fan at the core, and so I love all different styles of music. And to answer your question about Maiah, how the two of us met, I think I'm going to go back maybe 4.5 years ago. And at the time, I was still full-time A&R guy at Anthem Records. And I was doing a lot of the, any Rush fans that are listening, I was responsible for the box set for 2112, the 40th anniversary of the box set. I was the project manager on the A Farewell to Kings. And then just as I was segueing out, Hemispheres was coming out. But anyway, so dealing a lot with the catalog on Anthem Records, we did a big Max Webster box set. I brought in Stompin' Tom Connors for any Canadian fans. So we were, that was my job. And then one day I got this call from the CEO, said, Andy, can I ask you to be involved? I got a call. This guy has an online talent contest and he needs some judges. So I've already said you'll do it. And I've offered you up like a sacrificial lamb. Hopefully you're cool with that, right? And, Steve, being an A&R guy, there's been lots of times when people will say to me, we're doing like a battle of the bands or a homegrown contest or something like that. And there's a big radio station out here called 97.7 Hits FM in St. Catharines. And religiously for years, they asked me to come down and sit through a set of 5 different bands and, write down my comments, and then the winner would get some recording time, or they'd get some cash, or they'd get some gear. And that's what the premise of this contest was. It was a global online talent contest. And my job was to get 10 songs, vote them from 1 to 10, 1 being my most favorite, 10 being my least favorite. And then after the fact, I was asked if I would be kind enough to do a mentoring call with one of the winners. And I said, well, no problem, but that's a pretty shitty prize, but I'll do it anyway, right? I was like, that's it? They get a Zoom call with me? You're not going to give them? And they're like, no, Andy, we'll give them some cash and some gear and money for strings. I was like, okay, good. So fast forward, Maiah Wynne, who is our vocalist for Envy of None, was one of the winners. So I have a Zoom call, much like what we're doing here, thinking that I'm going to give her advice and I'm going to mentor her as a young 21-year-old singer-songwriter. So we did get into it, and she was asking me a lot about what I thought about her songs. And one of them in particular, Steve, was very different. Most part, it was very Americana, folk, pop, straight down the middle. And then there was this one really different song. I said, well, I love the harmonies. I love what you've created. I love your gift of melody. And it just feels almost trippy. Like, tell me why you weren't writing more songs like that. And she said, because the guy that I was writing with, he moved away from Portland. I don't have anyone to collaborate with. So I put on my mentoring cap and said, well, you got to go out and meet musicians. If you've got an opening slot, introduce yourself to the band, network, find other people in your town or your city. And just like, that's part of the ride of the musician. Without even breaking, she said, I looked you up on the internet. Can I write with you? And I was not expecting that, right? And it's funny because you're in Montreal. I say to people, she had the balls the size of Montreal. She just like stepped out and very innocently, naively just said, can I write with you? And so I said, well, you know what about if I start sending you some of these instrumental ideas. Some of them I have little pieces of melodies on, and some of them have little lyrical ideas. You don't have to keep them if you don't want them. You're the vocalist. It's important that you should have your own voice. And so I sent her about a half dozen ideas, and Shadow was one of the first ones that she said, oh, I like this. Showing the age difference, Steve, I got a funny story for you. She said, I like Shadow because it sounds like a video game. You know, it's like, what, like Super Mario, you mean, or something, you know? And there's this sequence or stuff going on throughout Shadow, right?
Yeah.
But it was very innocent, and it wasn't like she was trying to, I don't know, maybe try to ride on my coattails and go, oh, if I get in good with Andy, I might get a record deal or something. And we hit it off. And then she sent me what she did on Shadow. And I was like, oh my God, this is turning out awesome. And I subsequently sent it to Alex, and I sent it to Alfio, who I'd done a lot of different projects with. And those guys were like, Andy, well, you've found something special here. This girl's got a real gift. And that's where the whole thing kind of just took on a life of its own.
That's a great story. It almost sounds like the script for a movie.
Right. I listen, and she told me she's going to get a T-shirt that says "Balls the size of Montreal," and she's going to wear it on. She wears it proudly. And you know, further to that point, when I called her and said, "Hey, by the way, a friend of mine, his name is Alex Lifeson, he wants to play guitar on this," and we spoke about it. I've asked him to, and she goes, and I said, "Do you know who Alex is?" And she goes, I think so. I said, was in a band called Rush. And she goes, oh yeah, my parents like that band. But now, 3-4 years later, she's realized it's like very, you know, it's resonated what a crazy circumstance it is to have Alex Lifeson be part of your project. And I remind myself that every day. Like if you had asked me 5, 6, 10 years ago when I was working at the label, in the management company, hey, do you ever think you'll form a band with one of the guys in Rush or Tea Party or Big Wreck or any of the bands we were working with? I'd be like, Steve, not a chance in hell. I'm not crossing that line. I'm their label and they're part of their management team. So, you know, to get a call from Alex going, will you play bass on Spy House? Because that's how that track happened. I was like, what in what world does this happen? I jokingly said to him, don't you know any other bass players? Don't you have a guy named whose initials are GL on speed dial? Like, why are you calling me? You got freaking Geddy Lee. He's one of the best bass. Well, Geddy's writing his book, and you know he's busy right now. And Andy, it would really mean a lot to me. Can I send it to you? I don't like the bass line that I put on. So Spy House, Kabul Blues, Western Sunset was Alex Lifeson pulling me out of the baseball dugout saying, Andy, I'm going to send you some tracks over. Can you play bass? I was honored. I was just honored and kind of gobsmacked to go, in what lifetime does that happen?
Yeah. So you mentioned Western Sunset there, which closes the album. It's an instrumental, but it's also the most emotional song on the album because of the topic. So yeah. What can you tell me about that, and why does it close the album?
I'll answer both those questions for you because they have really good. It's a great question. Anyway, so Western Sunset. After I did Spy House in Kabul, Alex called me and said, I'm working on something and it's really like, again, I don't like my bass line and it's just really an instrumental piece. And he and I on the sidebar, Steve, I think it's important to tell you that he and I, outside of Envy of None, had been approached to write music for film and television. And we love soundtrack stuff. We love people like Danny Elfman and Trevor Rabin and Mark Mothersbaugh. These are musicians who've managed to take their careers as like mainstream musicians, but been able to do music for film and television. So we started going, hey, let's just send ideas back and forth, not for Envy of None, that we could put in the kitty, maybe if we're going to write music for film and television. And so Western Sunset came along. He didn't tell me anything about it other than it's an acoustic piece. I hate my bass line. So ironically, I picked up my fretless bass. It's a fretless Jaco Pastorius relic bass, the same that Jaco used when he was in Weather Report. But Geddy Lee actually gave me that as a present. Because we're pals and we love the bass guitar, and he gave that to me knowing that I love Jaco. So for some reason, I thought, oh, I'm going to pick that up, not knowing that the song was written about his time, inspired by his time with Neil. And I'm glad he didn't tell me about it, because I think I probably would have got very emotional. And Neil became a very good friend when we were working together in the Rush camp. So I probably would have thought way too much about it, overthought it probably, like, oh, this is super special. I got to, serve Neil Peart, right? Anyway, fast forward, we started talking about, when we got to about 7 or 8 songs, Alex said, how do you guys feel about maybe talking about including Spy House, Kabul Blues, and Western Sunset? And maybe Maiah, you can put some vocals on it, and there'll be different versions, because the versions of Spy House and Kabul Blues had been used for a Gibson Epiphone video that we did, and it was just backdrop of it, right? So Maiah, who's always up for the challenge, said, yes, send them over. I'm going to start writing lyrics for it. So she finishes Spy House, she finishes Kabul Blues, everybody loves it. And then she says to Alex, I'm having a real problem with Western Sunset. Can you tell me what inspired you to write that song? And that's when the story about Neil came out. And I can paraphrase for you, but Alex and Geddy, knowing that Neil had been sick for quite some time, and then the world didn't know this, probably about close to 3 years, where the little family group of SRO Anthem knew that Neil had this terminal sickness. So Geddy and Alex and myself, not so much. I went down a couple times to see Neil in California, but those guys were going down quite a lot. So this one particular visit, Alex told me he was out at Neil's house in Santa Monica, and they were on the balcony and they were overlooking the ocean. They were laughing and giggling and probably smoking joints and drinking whiskey, which they always love to do. And those two guys, actually the 3 guys in Rush, when they're together, they act like the Three Stooges. They act like they're 16 years old. That was the very first thing I noticed about working with Rush. When I went into the studio and they were doing the feedback record, I was like, oh my God, these guys are acting like they're high school chums and joking around and practical jokes. So there was a very close connection between Alex and Neil and their sense of humor. So he walked away with that moment as a very special moment, that he was with his buddy that he didn't know how long was going to be around for. They were having some laughs on the balcony, and just the sun was setting in the west, and he was in Santa Monica. So he told that to Maiah, and I had never heard that story. And I said, oh my God, thank God I didn't hear that story while I was tracking bass. So she went away, she tried to write lyrics for it, and then she came back and sent a few things to Alex back and forth. And they both agreed at the end that it would be best served as an instrumental. It just wasn't coming out how they wanted it to be. And she did some oohs and ahs and some layering. And then Alex came up with the great idea to close the record with it. He said, we've got these 10 or 11 songs that, are so, you got Enemy, and you've got like you said, it's Look Inside and Kabul Blues and everything. And you go through this ride and you digest this entire meal of all these sounds and different styles. And then at the end, you have this nice peaceful sort of after dinner aperitif, as he called it, where it's just like, okay, you're going to sit back and you're just going to chill. And that's the last song on the record. And Al wanted it that way. And we were like, sounds awesome. He came up with the whole sequencing of the entire record and specifically asked if we were cool with him ending it with that. And I think it's a very fitting tribute to his friend Neil.
For sure, because, it obviously comes from a sad place, but like you say, it's got a very uplifting feel to the music, and there's a lot of dark elements throughout the album. So it kind of it feels like a nice conclusion. It leaves you feeling hopeful.
Yeah, it does lighten the mood for sure, right?
Yeah.
Alex has been a very I wouldn't say outspoken, but very vocal proponent of cannabis and medical marijuana and all that kind of stuff. So he was like, imagine, Andy, you've listened to the whole album and then you spark up a reefer and you just listen to that last song. And, he had already thought about it. Right. But I agree with you. It's a nice way to punctuate that album, because it's quite a ride we take you on. And as you said, a lot of between Dog's Life and Enemy, and there's some pretty dark places on that record intentionally.
Yeah. So I've been listening to the album on a pretty nice system.
Yeah.
I have to say the production on it is phenomenal. it's such a big sound. It really, really fills the room. So tell me a little bit about how you actually recorded this, because obviously we've been through strange times over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. And I can get technical with you because I would say, and Maiah quickly caught up to us, but between Alfio, who is a engineer and and mixer, that by trade happens to be a multi-instrumentalist. So here's a guy that's a real gear nerd. He has an amazing system at his home, does a lot of mixing out of his home. A lot of music fans don't know that a lot of the music that's produced as technology has progressed, and you have Pro Tools and Logic and all these great platforms to work on at home. You don't have to go to a big recording studio to do it. We heard about Billie Eilish doing her record in her bedroom with her brother. You need to have savvy guys there, and guys and girls who have the chops to bring it to fruition, right? So Alex has got a great studio system at home. I've got a really good one at home. So other than the 2 times we tracked real drums, we tracked some drums in Toronto and we tracked some drums in Hamilton. And then the rest of it was done virtually, where I would take the seed of a demo idea, and I work in a program called Acid, and there's a lot of loops in there that you can layer on, but you can also lay tracks down. So I would send that off traditionally to Alfio. Alfio would listen to it. He would layer some stuff on it. And then we'd send it to Alex, and he would either put his guitars on right away or say, I want to wait till Maiah puts her vocals on so that I can craft my guitars around her vocals. So sometimes that process between who's going to get it last, Maiah or Alex, would change. But essentially, we did everything in our home studios. And then the mixing phase was done between Alex and Alfio on their systems. And sometimes we would go on a program called Audio Mover, where I could listen in real time to what Alf was doing. I could watch the faders go down. I could say, stop there for 1 second. You missed my stylophone. Bring up the stylophone for me. I need to get a credit on the album that says I played stylophone, right? And he'd start laughing. So, and then we had lots of offers from people like Gilmore of Triumph, who said, you want to come in and mix the record in Metalworks? I love your record. I think it sounds great. But we had such a handle on it that we were feeling pretty confident that the sounds that we were getting were going to pass the test. And you've said nicely that you love the sound of the record. But one last thing that happened was we were really second guessing whether this thing was good enough to release as is without going into a professional studio. So we called up a friend of ours, David Bottrell. And David, anybody who knows that name know that he has worked with Peter Gabriel. He's worked with Tool. He's worked with Rush. This guy is a super credible mixing engineer. And we were like, hey man, like, listen to these tracks. We think we like them, but have we missed the mark? And he was like, oh my God, you guys are doing an awesome job. Like, I would maybe change a level here and there, but if you're worried sonically, don't be. This thing sounds really, really good. So that's when we got our friend Harry Hess to master it. And Harry was a part of a hard rock hair band called Harem Scarum, believe it or not. I'm bringing out some good Canadiana here. And Harry has carved a really nice side career as a mastering guy. So the last guy to get his hands on it was Harry, mastering at H-Bomb, sent it over, and I heard it on Spotify in my car the other day, and I was like, damn, we did a pretty good job on that. You know, I was, when you step away and listen as a fan, it's much different, right? Because when you're writing it, I'm listening to every little layer. Oh, is the snare drum loud? Is that acoustic guitar there? Can you hear the stylophone? Just stupid shit like that, right? But I think it does sound pretty big, and I feel proud that we did that all pretty much remotely and from our home studios.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I think there's a couple of questions that a lot of people are going to want answered. And the first is this it? Is this all we're going to get from Envy of None, or is there more to come?
Alex and I and Alf and Maiah have already been starting talking about Envy of None 2.0. There was a lot of ideas, Steve, that we didn't get to. So we're kind of thinking, okay, let's ride this. The vibe is feeling really good. Everybody's getting along. We should just continue to write just for the sheer enjoyment of it, right? So I would say yes, that we will work together again with Envy of None, and lots of questions about will we perform live. And Alex, listen, respectfully, that guy spent so many years on the road. He's certainly not keen to get back out there and play shows. I would be the next guy in line to go. I don't know if I want to do the grind, but we have all agreed that we're going to see how this goes. And if there is a reason, if the reception is so positive that we can't avoid not going out and doing a handful of shows, then everybody's kind of said, hey, yeah, we'll figure out a way to do some shows. But we are enjoying the collaboration, and I don't think that this is it. I think there's more to come.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, you could do this in a different way, because like you say, you've done enough touring between you in the past, and this is a special project for you guys. Like, you could even do like the occasional one-off show. You could, like, I can imagine an orchestra on this.
Wow. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could even think about doing something a little bit different, just to keep it interesting for you guys, but as well as the fans.
Yeah, further to that point on adding to it or embellishing it, fans of Rush will know that those guys did a really great job of representing their records live, and whether it was Neil or Geddy or Alex triggering things with their feet. Like, if you think about what those guys were doing, playing bass and hitting bass pedals and keyboards and stuff like that. So Alex was the first guy to say to all of us, this is not going to be an easy journey replicating this live. We might need to get some other players involved because there's so many different sounds. So, be careful what you wish for, I think, Steve. We could be like, yeah, let's go do some shows. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, shit, we gotta hire an orchestra, as you said.
So you seem like the kind of guy that you're not just listening to music from the past. You've already mentioned people like Bonobo, and you mentioned Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
Do you keep your ear to the ground on new music?
Absolutely, I do. I'm like a great example of that. Last night, I went to see Tame Impala with my daughter. She turned me on to Tame Impala, and I fell in love with that guy. I had no idea who the heck they were, but I love them, right? So I try to keep my ear to the ground. Having two young daughters certainly keeps me youthful, and they're constantly, like, they know their dad's a knucklehead rocker. I'll say, they'll say, like, Dad, have you listened to Tame Impala? And I go, I'll listen to Tame Impala, but have you listened to Steve Miller? Go listen to Steve Miller. And now my daughter's a Steve Miller fan. So we're kind of helping out on both sides. But yeah, I love new music. I mean, I'm constantly finding bands and artists like, Middle Class Rut. I don't know how I discovered those guys. And I know they're not really around anymore, but I love them. There's a lot of electronic music. There's a DJ from Canada who calls herself Rez that I think is absolutely phenomenal. My daughter's got me into The Weeknd. I love what he does. So yeah, I try to keep an open mind about it. I think the only area I would tell you that I'm sort of don't really go down, I'm not a big rap guy. I like Snoop Dogg. I like old school rap. I like NWA, but some of the new stuff that quite literally to me as a musician, and my daughter and I will argue about this, I'll hear a Drake track is a perfect example. There'll be a drum beat and him basically talking or rapping with no other musical elements around. And I'm like, I'm out. I've lost interest after 15 seconds. And if at least Snoop Dogg would bring in some, cool R&B backing tracks or some crazy bass or some keyboards or some chord changes. So when it gets to be as Spartan as a beat with a lyrical thing in it, that's kind of where you lose me on it as a fan.
I have to say, one of the best live bands that I've seen, like a backing band, was with Jay-Z.
Oh, wow.
So there's definitely people in the hip hop realm that take the musicianship seriously. But I do know what you mean. It's not like there's a lot that's not about that.
I would agree, Steve. And as maybe it's the fault of being a musician, but I need some fiber to sink my teeth into. If there's not if there isn't a journey that it's taking me through, and it's just rapping over a beat, then you've lost me there. There's nothing compelling to keep me listening through that. And I will say this about country music. Country music now reminds me of Coney Hatch, believe it or not. It's 80s production. So you've got these guys writing chords and stuff about taking baseball bats to the windshield of their pickup truck and good old boy stuff, right? But I'm like, wait a sec. This sounds like the production on a Coney Hatch record. The drums sound huge and there's lots of reverb. So I find it, I'm very amused about production in country music. And so there's a little bit of a guilty pleasure listening to some of the new country music, because it sounds like rock and roll to me.
Yeah. So what's one album that you think everybody needs to listen to in their lifetime, from any album in history that you think is really important?
That's a great question. I'm going, if I could be so bold as to ask for two, I'm going to ask for two.
Sure.
Anybody who thinks they know Aerosmith and dismisses them as being a whatever band they think they are, they need to go out and listen to Rocks. Aerosmith Rocks, that album. Oh my God, just like, what a rock record. And I have worn out multiple copies of it. And there's so many great songs on that and playing. That's a big desert island one for me. And then I think Tom Petty's, I hope I'm correct on this, maybe the Full Moon Fever, or the one that has Into the Great Wide Open and, Free Falling, that record to me,
right.
That's timeless. And I think Tom Petty is one of the best songwriters in the world. And I love everything he's done. But if you said to me, you can only take 2 albums to a desert island, I would put those 2 under my arm and be a happy guy, because I never get tired of listening to either one of them.
Okay. And your musical catalog is obviously varied, especially now. What would you say is any song that you've written that you're just super proud of? Okay,
so again, I'm gonna ask for some grace on this, and I'm gonna give you 2.
Give me 2.
So going back before Envy of None, I had a project called Leisure World. It was it came and went. It was like a blip on the radar. The record company unfortunately went bankrupt, but we had a top 10 single with a song that's called I'm Dead. And we got a lot of airplay. It went top 10 in Boston and a few other places. And so that record before Envy of None was one of the records I was most proud of. And even that song I'm Dead, like, it'll just tear your head off. You can find it on Spotify and Apple and Amazon as under Leisure World. And I love it because of the productions. It's much more aggressive than Envy of None. And I love everything about it. I'm very proud of it. And I know that sounds a bit arrogant to say you love one of your records, but as I step away, I go, damn, I hope people remember me from that record, because I went deep on it. And then with the Envy of None record, I think it's a tie between Look Inside and Dumb for various reasons. Look Inside is like what we call our stoner lullaby. And I had a lot of fun with bass guitar and doubling it and putting it left and right and distorting it and just making it feel like it was a real, like you were on an acid trip or something, right? So I love the way that track turned out. But then on Dumb, there is something simplistic and, I'm going to tell you that my inspiration for that song was Tainted Love by Soft Cell. And I thought about the relentless beat in that. And I thought, man, I want to write a song like that, right? And I know they're 2 very different sounding songs, but I love the way that Dumb turned out.
Cool. Well, I love the way the whole album has turned out. Like I say, I genuinely think it's a great album, and it's obviously going to surprise a lot of people, but that's a good thing. And congratulations on it. It's about to come out. You must be pretty excited that you finally get to unleash it into the world.
Yeah, Alex, again, thank you for the kind words, because we are proud of it. And Alex was the one that kept saying to me, Andy, this is too good. This is too good to just keep as demos. We can't just pass it around as friends. The world has to hear this. But he said to me recently, isn't this cool? We get to share our 10 or 11 or 12, like the bonus track, I think we've got 13. We get to share our 13 little kids with the world, because we made those little things, right? And he talks about it being a family. I always use the comparison of letting the birds out of the nest, where finally the birds they've been in the nest, the eggs have been developing, and boom, now the world gets to see what we've been working on. But I'm very proud of it. I hope people like it. And I take joy in just going, it's finished. People are going to hear it. I'm proud of it. There's no expectations. We're not waiting for calls from people to say it's a top 10 hit, or you guys have been invited on to Coachella or Lollapalooza. If all that stuff happens, great. If it doesn't, we were proud and had fun on the ride. So we're trying to keep grounded about things, but the early response has been very positive. I'm trying not to go online to go, what are people thinking, right? But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the record. I think it is going to go down very well. And after all these years, both of you guys are still making interesting music. And I actually have to say, I think you're going to be the envy of many.
Oh, yeah. What an awesome way to end the interview, Stephen. Thank you so much, buddy. I had fingers crossed. Yeah. And hopefully we get to talk again. Maybe the next chapter is if we're in Montreal and you come out and see us. I love the city and love spending time there.
Cool, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.